Suffs on Broadway is unique for many reasons, not the least of which is that the entire cast and team are made up completely of women and non-binary folks. But does this alone make a great musical? How does Suffs compare when it's stacked up against the quality that we all long for in a piece of new musical theater that lands itself on Broadway? What's great about the show? What falls a little flat? And how about the writing itself? And is it worth spending your hard-earned time and money to go see it? Let's dive in for a musical theater writer guy review of Suffs on Broadway. No spoilers here, but for a little overview of plot. This musical is about the suffragist movement, but not the beginnings of the movement, actually a couple of generations down. We follow Alice Paul as our protagonist as she goes through her journey in the movement, and in particular as she butts up against the older generation, which is epitomized through the character of Carrie Chapman Catt. It is a dense plot line filled with lots of characters, and for good reason. There are a lot of fantastic stories in here. If you think you know the history, you'll probably still learn something along the way. I went in knowing some of the history, but not nearly enough, clearly, because I learned a lot in my first time seeing it. Okay, let's talk about performance quality. Y'all, I have no complaints here. These performances, stellar. They're all so good. I mean, give them all a Tony Award. Let's just hand them all the Tonys and say thank you for your service. I got to see Shayna Taub play Alice Paul the first time that I saw the show, and she did a fantastic job. I got to see her understudy the second time, who also did a fantastic job. Nikki M. James is nailing it over there. Jen Colella is blowing the roof off the place every single day, and the entire cast is just stacked. For a show that is mostly surrounding white women and their journey, we do also get to see how diversity comes into play in the story as well, and I appreciate that. Let's talk about direction and choreography. In all honesty, after the first time I saw it, I don't know that I was in love with the direction of the piece, and I like Lee Silverman a lot, but upon seeing it a second time, I was trying to pay more attention now that I didn't have to focus as much on the plot and the details. I could kind of zoom out a little bit, and I actually think it's really well directed. There were a lot of nuances to the direction that I didn't notice the first time through, and in particular with the way that that space works inside the Music Box Theater. I applaud you, Lee Silverman. You did some beautiful work in here. Not to mention, my favorite thing about the direction is how they got around ever having a man on stage. And I won't say too much about that because there are a lot of different routes they took, but I thought that was so smart. In terms of choreography, I can either take it or leave it. What they have there, I think, works and works well. My biggest question is how the choreography does or does not work with the costumes. And the costumes are beautiful, and they're brilliant, and they're really well done, and they are very appropriate to the time period, but we lose a lot of the choreography in the costumes themselves. So I have more of a question about that, but you never know what went into the process. Let's talk music and lyrics. Let's talk the score. Let's talk Shayna Taub writing things. By the way, there was a great Playbill article recently where Shayna Taub went through the entirety of that score and broke down the histories of each of the songs and how they evolved across time and her writing of the piece. It is well worth your time. I'll try to put it in the description below if I don't forget. This score is cool. I enjoy this score a lot. I don't know that there's a lot of songs I'm gonna go back to a lot over and over again just for easy listening because it is pretty dense quite often, but it was so enjoyable the first time and the second time. One of my favorite things about the score is the use of different themes throughout. When Shayna was writing in that article, she did say the word motif a lot, but I think it goes beyond motif work into actual themes for certain characters that grow along the way. It felt less like we were motifing within the score itself, but actively singing set pieces of music when that subject matter came up. I know that's a fine line between them, but I really enjoyed how many themes there were, and so when something came back, it was landing with importance later on, I got excited about it. Plus, Finish the Fight is just a banger. I love it. It's great. She nailed it. Definitely a score worth listening to. I've not yet listened to the album. It literally came out yesterday, but I'm excited to. It's gonna be great. Let's talk about the design. Design was great. Like I said, those costumes, they deserve that nomination. It's really good. The lighting, I think, does a wonderful job of storytelling and directing our eye. There is so much that we could possibly be looking at, but there are a couple of standout moments, particularly in the use of, and I don't want to give too much away, but particularly in the use of silhouette, and also there may or may not be just a little bit of fire at some point in this show, and I like what that was doing, that whole lighting sequence as well. In terms of the set design, it was smart, it was well utilized, there's not a lot of space in the Music Box Theater, and I think they used it well. It seemed to go off without a hitch. I will say I always got slightly nervous as the performers were walking near the opening in the center of the stage, but they seem to have it well handled. Overall production quality, stellar. I don't know. What do you want me to say? It's a Broadway show that did not spare any expenses, and on top of that, knows what it's doing. Audience engagement is going to be an interesting little topic here, because like I said, I saw the show twice. The first time I saw the show, there felt something off about the energy that day, and I don't know what it was, what it could have been. I don't know if it was the audience, I don't know if it was the people on stage, but I enjoyed the show and I knew I had to go back to see how I truly felt about it. I'm glad I got a chance to do so. That is a privilege that I enjoyed, but the energy the first day was a little weird. The audience seemed to enjoy it, but they weren't, I don't know, over the moon for it. And it was an audience filled with a lot of tourists that day. But when I came back for the second time around, it was an audience that clearly knew a little bit more about the show and was excited to be there, and the energy was kind of raucous and people were cheering and clapping before anything really happened at certain times, and the energy was just exciting. The audience seemed to respond just how you wanted them to throughout the entire show. They were feeling their feelings, they were laughing, they were crying. I think they're doing a great job as far as how the audience interacts with the story. Wow, that was a diatribe. So, how does this show compare to other shows that are similar? Well, I don't know what other shows are similar. There's definitely some nods, and pretty blatant nods, to other writers and other writing styles and other shows that exist. But as far as a show that is about women and women's rights, and is specifically performed by women and non-binary folks, I don't have anything else to compare it to. We could look at the recent revival of 1776, but really that felt more like a reclamation than a new musical that was doing this particular thing. So it's hard to compare it. But would I compare it to the other hit musicals of the past 10, 15 years and say that it matches in quality? Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, you want to know what my gripes are? Let's talk about them. They're pretty few, but they're important to me. The first one that I mentioned already was about the choreography. I feel like it gets lost in the costuming, and also I'm not sure that it was really adding to the story too much. It felt a little bit like we were trying to do something like new and modern and maybe tangential to Hamilton, but it didn't feel right for me for my money. But maybe that was just me. The first section of this show has a very clear goal for Alice Paul. There's a march that needs to happen, and we spend the entire first part of the show leading up to the march. We also have a clear goal at the end of the show. Act 2 has got a lot of clarity to it. But the second half of the first act leading up to intermission, I'm not entirely sure what the next goal was, and I feel like we lost the plot a little bit, and it kind of meandered a touch. I wasn't sure if Woodrow Wilson's decision was the goal. If so, how does that give agency to Alice Paul? And so the second time around, I tried to, again, zoom out and just enjoy a little more, and I was able to, but that first time, I just felt like we meandered a little too much in Act 1. But like I said, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of history, so tomato potato. Another one for me is that the black suffragist characters, who are wonderful and beautifully portrayed, they seem to get just a little less time and depth than I wanted. They felt like they were close to being three-dimensional characters, but never quite made their way there, especially Nikki James's character, who was just someone that we felt for and felt with, but there was just a little extra rounding out that needed to be there in the character to make her feel fully fleshed out and three-dimensional. So I wish we'd been able to do that, but I also don't know what was there prior to cuts. So maybe she was more fleshed out originally. This one's very personal to my tastes, but there were quite a few songs in the show where people are singing their thoughts inside their head and just making them aloud, and there's not actually action happening on stage and through the song. It's more of a, we hit pause here, and now we're going to hear what this character thinks. Does it happen a ton in the show? No, but it seems to happen in some prominent moments. And for my money, I like the songs to move the plot and the characters forward more directly, especially in interaction with other people and with the world. And then this isn't so much a gripe, just it could use even more tightening up. I know they did a lot of changes after the public last year, 2 years ago, whenever that was, but I still think that there are a few places where some extra tightening could be useful for the overall pacing of the show, but honestly, if they had the other things fixed and still didn't tighten, oh well, I would still enjoy it. Ticket value. I mean, I think the show's doing a great job of keeping their ticket prices relatively accessible, and I think you get plenty for the money that you pay. In terms of the cultural and social impact of this show, I don't think we can understate it. This is a critical time in our history now where we are once again looking at women having to fight for their rights very specifically. And so this feels incredibly relevant to today. And I also very much enjoy that, especially with Hillary and Malala being producers on the show, this show is making an effort in creating a campaign to get the word out there and to help women get their rights back. Which does lead me to the question of who's the target audience for this show. Honestly, I think the only people who this show is not for is for people who don't like a story about feminists and who are not interested in the history of white feminism. Now, is it more than white feminism, really, at the end of the day? The answer is yes, but this is, at the end of the day, also a story that focuses on white feminists. So who is the target audience? I would definitely say millennials, Gen X, baby boomers who enjoy musical theater and who are feminist and who like a historical story and are excited to listen to this music and to be a part of the journey. Do I think Gen Z would enjoy it as well? Yes, I think some Gen Z absolutely will. I think they're a little spottier in terms of what they will or will not enjoy when it comes to political material, but hey, here we are. I think that this is a large cross-section of people who will indeed enjoy it. Okay, so what are my personal feelings on the show? First time I saw it, I liked it a lot, but I didn't love it quite yet, but I felt like I could, and it was just the performance, and so again, I got to go back a few weeks later, and I did indeed fall in love with the show. It's been on my mind ever since. I think a lot of the writing is very smart and well crafted, well put together. Those performances are insane. Seeing a cast filled with just women and non-binary folks is so rare, and it was exciting. And you could feel inside the room the energy, the feminine energy of this cast and creative team in a way that was just so beautiful and lovely and wonderful. And it's a story that is built to excite you about what the future can be and what the cycles of progress are. And honestly, I loved it. And would I recommend this show to people? Absolutely. This one gets my A+ recommendation. I would indeed recommend Suffs on Broadway. Clearly, writing a musical takes a long time and a lot of work, and this team did a beautiful job over the past, well, 10 years putting this show together. And I don't pretend like creating for this art form is easy, because it definitely is not. It's a long journey, it is complicated, it can often be frustrating, and I know because I've done it multiple times. And if this is something that you are also interested in doing as well, then you need to know about the 4 essential stages of this entire process, which means that you need to watch this video next. Otherwise...
Thank you all for being here with me today, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers!